Tariffs. It's the talk of the town. But is this the end of the U.S. economy? Is Donald Trump stealing your Social Security? On a day when the world seems like it's turning upside down, we're going to cut through the noise and get to the truth here on The Deep End on Tim Hatch Live. Hey everybody, markets are rattled, headlines are chaotic, and fear is on the rise. But what if it looks like all the destruction is actually just a global reset? I'm Pastor Tim Hatch, and this is The Deep End, where we talk about the news of the day through the lens of a pastor. And I do have a stake in the game here. I'm invested in the stock market like many of you. I also have a retirement, and it is down, and things look like the markets are just going to continue to tumble. And who knows what's next. But the future of how we live, work, and worship are all interconnected. And as Christians, we need to keep our heads on our shoulders and have a good perspective of what's exactly taking place. I hope to provide that for you in this video. Let's discuss Donald Trump's plan to basically tax every other nation on the planet, even if there's no living human beings on that nation's soil. Yes, you did hear possibly that there was a particular island nation that only was inhabited by penguins, and Donald Trump slapped a 10% tariff on that island as well. Let's see what the penguins produce. Whatever they produce, they're going to be paying 10% more to get it over here. Anyway, you probably saw this announcement called Liberation Day, where Donald Trump took out the big chart that he had developed to talk about reciprocal tariffs that he was going to impose on American goods shipped on other nations' goods shipped into America. And this was to balance the scales. And many have discussed the facts that this is bad for the economy. It's inflationary. Everything's going to get far more expensive. You're not going to be able to pay your gas bill, your electric bill, and on the fear mongers go. So how should we respond as Christians? Well, let's get some facts. First of all, a fact about the tariff numbers on Donald Trump's chart there. These are not actually exact tariff numbers. Those percentages that you see in the column to the left, tariffs charged to the U.S., China, European Union, Vietnam, Taiwan, high numbers, 67%, 39%, 90%, 64%, and then the reciprocal tariffs, half. But how did they come to those numbers on the left? Those actually aren't tariff numbers. There is a guy on X, this is his name, James, and I won't pronounce his last name for you, came up with a formula that figured out what actually the administration did to come up with these numbers that they're calling tariffs. They aren't actually tariffs. A formula was used to come up with a number based on trade deficits. By the way, a trade deficit just means that we're buying more from another country than they are buying from us, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. So if we import $100 billion of stuff from them, but they only import $60 billion from us, we've got a $40 billion trade deficit. It's like running a tab. We're spending more on their goods than they're spending on ours. And to show you, this is a fancy formula that I'm going to claim I used to sound smart for this video, and then I'm going to take it down because I did not use that formula. I just borrowed what James came up with on X. And here's an example that he provides. The U.S. had about a $295 billion trade deficit with China and imported around $440 billion worth of goods. So you take 295 divided by 440, and it becomes a 67% number. Then you divide that by 2 and round up, and boom, a 34% tariff on China. They did the same with Indonesia. We had a $17.9 billion deficit, imported $29 billion worth of goods. So 17.9 divided by 28 becomes 64. Half of that is 32. But here's the kicker. Indonesia never charged us 64% to begin with in tariffs. Their real average on tariffs or goods from the U.S. was around 8%. So not even close to the 32% that we're not now going to charge Indonesia. The math's off. And it leaves out service industry, where we actually have a surplus with many of these countries. But nonetheless, Trump was taking this serious in his presentation last week. Trump is trying to redefine the global trade rules, and he is weighting those rules in the US's favor at extraordinary levels. And the markets reacted because everybody is absolutely convinced that this is the wrong thing. Even Republican senators and legislators are coming out and proposing bills to oppose Trump's ability to impose these tariffs on other countries. Now, we talk about free trade, but really we don't have free trade. And on that issue, Trump is emphatically correct. And Democrats have been saying this for some time. This is a chart that you could call free trade by the G20 countries and how they charge us. In the dark blue is their tariff rate, and in the lighter blue is their non-tariff costs associated with shipping goods into our country. And you can see at the bottom of the list of the G20 countries is the United States. So not exactly fair trade for us. In other words, to get our stuff, they pay a lot less than we pay to get their stuff. Now, the markets are reacting like crazy. The Dow Jones is way down, although not as far down as it was earlier this morning. There is a bit of a bounce, and it's going up and down like crazy because money has come out. People have capitalized on the roaring stock market that has happened for the last 2 years. The Dow and S&P are in correction territory, but the funny thing with the stock market is simply this: always zoom out. As you can see here on the screen, notice that from 2021 to today, the stock market is still overwhelmingly positive, and it is very hypocritical to freak out about what's happening now in this correction and ignore the correction that happened in 2022 and 2023 when Joe Biden was president. And I would like to add that as Americans, we have the luxury of panicking over things that haven't actually hurt us. Literally nothing has changed except for perhaps your retirement balance. But are you retiring tomorrow? Do you need that money right now? I mean, if you need all of it right now, I could see you panicking, but there are very few people who need all of their retirement money in this instant. Stock holdings are not actually the be-all, end-all of your life. I'm down, you're down, we're all down. But other than that, inflation, prices going up, your life coming to an end, and the U.S. entering a recession is all speculation. Literally every doom and gloom report right now on what could happen because of Trump's tariffs are exactly that. What could happen, not what will happen. And I would like to remind you of a COVID-19 lesson. Don't believe everything the experts, quote unquote experts, are telling you. Can we finally get this lesson learned and not fall into fear and anxiety because of some talking head on YouTube, except for me, is telling you? So all over X, you can load up the posts as many prognosticators are making the most dire predictions as to what's going to happen, from Robert Reich of Clinton economic advisory fame to Mark Cuban and others, all saying that the worst has yet to come and we are in an inflationary cycle automatically simply because these tariffs have been imposed. But is it true? And if it's true, is it the worst thing possible? Again, you've got to look at things in a greater perspective than in the moment, in the 24-hour news cycle that we are in the doom scrolling news cycle that we are in, where you can just fear and fear and fear the more and more you hear. I give you an example. There was a global market crisis back in 2008. I was invested in the market back then. I'm still invested in the market. And I remember as a pastor seeing the faces on people as they came to church with a sense of dread. What was next? Was this the end? Are they ever going to be able to afford anything ever again? And the U.S. housing market crash in 2008 was a serious problem. But if you zoom out and look at the history of housing prices, I give you this chart of median sales prices of a home in the U.S. from February of 1975, where it was $37,900 for a house. Imagine that cost. To February 2025, 50 years later, the average cost is $425,000 for a house in the U.S. Consider this. If you bought at the height of the market just before the financial crash in 2008, in February of 2007, and you bought your house for $232,000, congratulations. You now have a lot of equity in your home in spite of all of that doom and gloom that you heard about. There's a lesson in financial history that you have to embrace. When in doubt, zoom out. You've got to see it in the long-term perspective. Sure, we're down right now. It doesn't mean we're out. So if you look at the past year of the Dow, we're down 1,000 points. But if you look at the past 2 years, we are up. And if you look at the past 5 years, we are up 14,000 points. Those are good numbers, but you've got to zoom out to get perspective. Now I'd like to introduce you, because we hear nothing but bad things about tariffs, to some pro-tariff arguments. Because in my humble opinion, I think that these tariffs are probably the right thing to do. And I say that from having really reasoned this out and examined the stats and the data. But I am a pastor and not an economic advisor, but we will be joined by one in just a few moments, so hang tight. I give you this article from prosperousamerica.org. This is written by a guy named Jeff Ferry, Chief Economic advisor over there at the Coalition for a Prosperous America. He argues that tariffs have positively impacted the U.S. economy in recent years. Successive specific tariffs on steel and washing machines, have significantly contributed to rebuilding these industries in our country and leading to the creation of thousands of jobs. Also, the impact of Trump's first-term China tariffs, which Joe Biden actually kept in place when he was in office, facilitated the reshoring of many manufacturing plants to the U.S. and initiated a decoupling process from China. Notably, China's exports declined by 4.6% in the previous year. Directly from the article, quote, consumer price inflation actually fell under Trump's tariffs. That means your prices went down from 2.4% in 2018 to 1.8% in 2019. How many remember when we had record low inflation before Biden got into office? However, in the wake of the COVID pandemic, inflation took off as our government flooded the market with free money, and supply chain snafus and shipping difficulties made goods hard to get. At that point, more tariffs and more domestic production would have helped hold down inflation, end quote. Ferry concludes that tariffs, when implemented effectively, can bolster domestic industries and enhance economic growth. A report from 2021 from AmericanManufacturing.org cited the fact that the trade enforcement on steel imports worked to our advantage. And more from Jeff Ferry, a global 10% tariff, which is exactly what Trump imposed on every country known to man, even ones inhabited by penguins right now, could raise incomes and pay for large income tax cuts for lower and middle class people in the future. His claims are that the tariffs could stimulate those domestic productions, and that would make imports less competitive. Then the shift would lead to an economic growth of perhaps $720 billion and the creation of approximately 2.8 million additional jobs. Again, these are all hypotheses. These are all people estimating and telling you what could happen. But the results from Jeff Ferry's analysis here are resoundingly positive. And I would like to also add that it has been my stipulation from the beginning that a lot of these tariff policies are a backdoor way to reduce globalization and its impact upon the American citizen. Globalization is not our friend. I know there's a lot of people who believe that it is. This is the John Lennon philosophy. Imagine there's no countries, there's no borders, and therefore there's no wars. And we all just hold hands, sit in a circle, sing kumbaya, and eat rice and beans all day, every day, because we are finally one. Is that actually a possibility? I would actually stipulate it is not. You see, the Bible is our guide for life and for our perspective on life. And when you look at globalization, the one place where you find it is in the end of the Bible, the book of Revelation. One world leader comes to power, makes a covenant with Israel, breaks that covenant. This is Daniel in Revelation, by the way. And then he imposes a one world order. Government is all centralized. Everybody is accountable to the dictator and his prophet, and so on and so forth. These are spiritual terms applied to civil order that I believe will come about in the last days. There's going to be a movement toward globalization. Secular globalization is bad for America. Why? Because America has been a traditionally Christian nation. We have led the world economically because we are prosperous. And I would argue that we are prosperous because we are, by and large, Christian, or at least Christian influenced heavily. At least 60% of our citizens still consider themselves Christian by designation. A Christian nation with Christian consciences on how to handle your income and how to treat your neighbor is a better place to live. My friends, the rest of the world is not like that. If you go to other countries where you see Islam abounding or Hinduism abounding, there's a reason why those countries are less prosperous than our country. And globalization has only benefited those countries, not ours. And so could it be that Trump is trying to bash globalism back a few decades and take care of Americans for a change? I happen to believe, even as a pastor, it is a moral imperative for our civil leaders to take care of our citizens, not the citizens of the world. You can take care of the citizens of the world anytime you want. You can partner with a missions organization. You can partner with an NGO and some other organization and send your money overseas and help as many people as you want. And I actually encourage that, as my church does, and I do personally. However, when it comes to the leaders of our country, their God-given responsibility is to protect the citizens of the country that they lead. They've got to have a heart for the people that they, quote unquote, shepherd. Again, the biblical analogy in the prophets of the Old Testament for civil leaders is shepherds for the sheep. And America needs shepherds who care about the sheep that live in this country, not other countries. Now, consider this argument. Globalization has a pesky little nasty black mark on it. I'll explain. If Americans benefit from paying less for goods imported from other countries, it's because those countries can hire workers at slave labor wages. So we get cheap TVs because some foreign country can hire some person in their citizenry who will make 20 cents an hour to put our TV or our iPhone together. That is exploitation on an international level. So your cheap TV is because some guy in China can put it together for you at a fraction of what it would cost an American to put it together for you. Now, my friends, I ask you, is that fair to the Chinese worker? Do you care about the Chinese worker? Shouldn't Americans take care of American workers and provide them jobs that will help them to pay their bills and feed their families? And then could it not also be that the poverty we impose on these countries for providing cheap labor to put together our TVs and phones could incentivize those poverty-stricken citizens to risk their lives to enter into our country illegally? Yes, illegal immigration may be the result of globalization. And I'm not the only one who says it. This article from Scientific Blogging way back in 2015 suggests the same thing. Create a slave labor class in another country by removing the tariffs imposed on that country to ship those goods overseas to us. It becomes financially expedient for a country to develop their product overseas at the hands of slaves than to hire American workers. And then that country, that impoverished working class group, says, wait a second, let me get on the other side of this economic equation, enter into the country that is benefiting from this exploitation, and I will take advantage like the American citizens are taking advantage. Wouldn't it be better if every country had workers paid a living wage, including our own and those other countries? My friends, don't freak out about what's happening here yet. We have to give it time and give it a chance. And I would like to introduce you to some people who wanted to give tariffs a chance in the past. Notably, Bernie Sanders, a Democratic senator, said this in 2018. Watch.
I believe in trade, but I believe in fair trade, not unfettered free trade. I do not believe that we should be shutting down factories in America and having corporations run to desperate countries where people are paid $1 or $2 an hour. I don't believe in that. The function of trade is not made just to make large corporations wealthier.
Tariffs?
When tariffs are necessary, absolutely. We'll use all the tools that we have.
So I'm sorry, I said 2018, it's 2019. He was about to run for president back then. And not only Bernie Sanders, but leader of the Democratic Party up until last year, Nancy Pelosi in 1996, called out the exploitation of China's import tariffs as opposed to America's import tariffs on the House floor, saying the following. Watch.
I'd like to call the attention of our colleagues to this chart on the status quo that the business community is asking each and every one of us to endorse today. Right now, we have a $34 billion trade deficit with China, the 1995 figure. It will be over $40 billion for 1996. Since the Tiananmen Square massacre, this figure has increased 1,000%, from $3.5 billion then to about $34 billion now. In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? On exports, China only allows certain industries into China, of U.S. Industries into China, and therefore only 2% of U.S. exports are allowed into China. On the other hand, the U.S. allows China to flood our markets with a third of their exports, and that'll probably go over 40%. And it's limitless because we have not placed any restriction.
And she goes on to make the exact same arguments about tariffs that Donald Trump is making right now. More than just those two, we also have Obama in 2012 during a debate with Mitt Romney, saying that the Republicans criticized him for imposing tariffs to stop free trade in imports from other countries. Watch.
We had a tire case in which they were flooding us with cheap domestic tires or cheap Chinese tires. And we put a stop to it. And as a consequence, saved jobs throughout America. I have to say that Governor Romney criticized me for being too tough in that tire case. Said this wouldn't be good for American workers and that it would be protectionist. But I tell you, those workers don't feel that way. They feel as if they had finally an administration who was going to take this issue seriously.
So, of course, the question for you might be, what do I do? I hear what you're saying, but I've got a 401k that is dropping. I got to pay my bills. I've got to have a life in my future. What should I do? And so that is where we come to now. I am excited to have a guest on the show today that helps me make financial decisions for myself. And he is going to join us now on this week's edition of The Conversation. All right, joining me now is Doug White. He is my personal financial advisor and an elder in my church, but he has been doing this for a lot longer than a lot of us have been alive. And he knows how to handle the ups and the downs of the market, which is very common. So, Doug, what's your advice to people right now? They're looking at the stock market, they're looking at the 401k, their retirement, they're saying, this is the end, pull my money out, freak out, Trump's ruining everything, whatever. What do you say?
Well, I say, let's put you into perspective. And are you looking to retire here at some, near future date, like next year or the year after? Or are you in your 40s and you're just accumulating money? To the one who's in their 40s accumulating money, 50s accumulating money, I say, get that next paycheck paid, put that money in, and enjoy the lower share prices. Things are on sale right now. We just went through a period of time with rapid inflation, and now the stock market's on sale. So we're not having any inflation in the stock market right now, and it's a good opportunity. If you're near retirement, it's a long-term play. So if your money's already in the market, don't sell, because if you sell now, you're locking in the loss. If you owned a share of a mutual fund at $10 a share and it's $5 a share, you're just going to lose $5 a share by selling it right now. So you want to hold on to that. Yeah. If you're putting money away, you're going to be able to buy it at $5. So don't sell the $10 ones, buy some more $5 ones.
Okay, I also heard that Trump wants to call on, or I think he has already called on Jerome Powell to cut interest rates. So talk to the person who's thinking about, do I apply for the mortgage now? Do I wait? What is your, feeling on the sense of where all this goes?
Well, if they cut the prime rate, if they cut the Fed rate, then that's going to translate into lower mortgage rates. So if you're near to buying a house, maybe drag your feet a little bit and see what happens. But don't lose the house that you have on the market, because it's still a tight housing market. So you don't want to lose out on that house if you like it and it's a good price. You can always refinance that later if you wanted to. But, kind of slow the process down, but don't put yourself in danger of losing that property.
And you say a good point there. The stock market is now a not inflationary market. Does that then, in a couple of months, from your knowledge of how things work, does that then translate to cheaper milk, cheaper eggs, cheaper cars, or does that not equate traditionally? What happens when the stock market does this kind of correction? What happens to consumer goods?
Okay, so people will probably feel that prices will come down on some of the things, but it's not exactly because of what the stock market did. It's because of the value of the dollar going up. So anything that we import from other nations, if the value of the dollar goes up, we get more of that stuff for less dollars. Conversely, when they're buying from us with the tariffs on top, they might not be buying as much stuff from us. I guess the good news on that is we are an importer nation, and we are not as big an exporter nation as we used to be. Now, we want to be a more exporting nation. One of the things we want to export is energy. Energy prices are coming down. So by bringing manufacturing back, by producing more energy that we can sell, they're putting a tariff on us. We're just reciprocating. We're bringing our tariffs up to what they charge us. So, the cost of things is going to feel easier, not because the market's going up and down, but because the dollar's getting stronger.
That's a good point.
People pull their money out of the market, they put an order in to sell, they get paid the share price for that share they sold, it goes into cash. It sits in the cash accumulation of their brokerage account, or it sits in a cash position in their 401k. From there, they can buy more shares. But the share price is still continuing to go up or to go down. The thing is, a lot of people who aren't just in their retirement plans, but they're invested for a long period of time or a short period of time, have taken money from the market. That cash is in their accounts. It's not going to stay there. It's going to come back into the market. They're really strict, good investors. They sell high, and we had a high market. Been good.
Yeah.
And they sold and they made a profit. They're going to buy when it's low.
Yeah.
Now, it's low, and today has been a very volatile day. It kind of feels like they're trying to get ready to start buying. At about 10:30 this morning, we were up like 400 points on the Dow. Now I think we're closer to 900 down the last time I checked. But it's been going up, it's been going down. There's been news that's been fake news that said we were going to put a 90-day pause on, but we didn't. We're going to negotiate this thing. We want reciprocal trade with foreign countries.
Yeah, and we want equal benefit from trade. For far too long, America has been kind of used and abused by the nations of the world. This was the product of trying to rebuild Europe after World War II, because we felt bad about how World War I ended and World War I ended and the Germans retreated, and we all know the end result of that. But now we're on the back end of decades long, the countries of the world are taking advantage of us. That's my opinion. Seems like it's your opinion as well. And these tariffs probably will be the good thing for America in the long run.
We are a $22 trillion economy. So $22 trillion is what the other countries want access to. They don't have that. We don't need access to their markets. They need access to our markets. And now they're going to pay for it.
Word.
So calling it the External Revenue Service. Okay, instead of the IRS, it's the ERS.
Oh, I like it.
The ERS is going to give us an opportunity to lower taxes so that our buying power goes up. We don't have to pay as much out in taxes. So I think that the long range thing in this, the only thing is politically, you've got to keep your head in the game and know this is for the long term good.
Very good points all around, Doug. I especially love the idea of don't abolish the IRS, just change the letter to the ERS. Let's take the money from other people, not the residents of this country, and rebuild our economy.
Florida has been doing it for years. They tax rental cars and hotels, and they have airfare taxes when you fly into their state to take the tax burden off the residents. Well, the United States has taken a page out of that script, and they're saying, let's do that here. Let's let foreign countries pay so that the residents of America can benefit from it. Yeah,
they say Florida is the playground of America, but America is the playground of the world. And so, very good point. Doug, thanks for joining us here on The Deep End, and your insight is always invaluable, and I just hope everybody's listening in and paying attention and doing what's best for them. Thanks for your time.
All right. Bye-bye.
And I thank Doug once again for being on the show. Give him some love in the comments if you don't mind. He is such a great guy, and he knows what he's talking about. Hopefully he brought some peace of mind to you. So what do we do now? I want to give you my take on tariffs, and I would say three things. Number one, can we just wait? After all, you have no other choice. You can't change anything. Nothing is killing you right now. You're still alive. You still have food on the table, yes? Now, you might want to give things a shot before jumping off the tangent of overreaction, such as is happening in the stock market. The stock market, by the way, traditionally overreacts quickly and then recovers slowly. Keep that in mind. But let's wait. Let's see. Let's find out in a year from now where we are before we make a slap judgment about what Trump is doing. Number two, fixing anything requires pain. And you have to live exactly, 6 years to figure this out. Because you had a problem when you were younger, you had diapers, somebody had to change you. Well, you had to go through the pain of learning how to go on a toilet and take care of business yourself. And then you had to learn how to dress yourself. And all those processes of transition and growth require pain on your part. But when you get older, the pain gets harder and you have bigger problems. When you get cancer, you need to go through the painful treatment of cancer treatment. If you overspend in your budget, you need to go through the pain of cutting back and decreasing what you put out of your wallet so that you can maximize what is coming into your wallet. If you go through a hardship or a divorce or somebody dies, there's pain as you recover from that hardship. Hard transitions are not easy and pain is necessary. And I would suggest to you that we are experiencing the immediacy of pain so that in the long run, we can have maybe some more pleasure from how we handle our finances and how the global economy works. Just a suggestion, my take on tariffs. And then number three, I would expect modest improvement as a result. This is my hope. Modest improvement at the end of all of this tariff negotiation and back and forth. Because there's really just two extreme ends that we can go to. Number one, the extreme end is Trump proves himself to be a global financial genius. He sends our country into a financial golden age unheard of before or ever again. Young people can afford any house that they want. Retirement accounts blow up and the government debt is lowered and we are now a debt-free nation. That's extreme number one. And that's not happening. Extreme number two. Trump knows nothing of global economics. He is a fraud in the making, and the country enters into a prolonged recession, dare I say, depression. The Republican Party is tossed on the ash heap of history, and Democrats rule forever. Now, that's the worst case scenario. Guess what's going to happen? Something in the middle. Here's what I think is going to happen. It's going to be better for us, but in modest ways. America is a big ship of 360 million people. You don't turn a big ship on a dime. You make small tweaks, and over the long haul of the journey, you arrive at a different destination. But one thing can be sure, and we heard this rhetoric on the campaign trail not 6 months ago, but America couldn't keep going in the direction that it was going. Both left and right politicians convinced us that we needed to make a change. Well, one politician stepped up and made that change. Now we get to sit back and watch and make a judgment call a year, 2 years, 3 years from now as to whether it was the right call. But I will say this, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So here's the deal. We've been doing the same thing as a country for 40 plus years, taxing, borrowing, spending, and has led to a potential insolvency and catastrophe. We could not keep going in the way that we were and expect better results. This transition needed to happen, and I think it will end up better for us in the long run, albeit moderately better. There are some signs already that world leaders are starting to cave and ready to come and level the trade playing field, and that is a good thing for every American. Finally, I would like to say to you as a pastor, peace be still. That's my admonition to you. When economic waves arise, when the storms are surrounding you, we have a Savior who is there. He's probably sleeping in your boat because you haven't bothered to talk to him for a few months. Wake him up and ask him if he cares, and you will find out that he holds you in his hand and he knows how to still the storm, and he'll still the storm once again for you. Don't panic. Jesus is still the Prince of Peace. Thanks for joining us for the free content, and I got so much more on the extra content, but you've got to be a subscriber to help support this stuff. It's at patreon.com/TimHatchLive, $10 a month. Right now, that gets you into the extra content immediately. When you support us, we support Project Rescue and the American Bible Society. But it's been my absolute pleasure to bring this content to you. I hope it helps you. I hope it brings peace to you, and I'll see the dependable membership people right now.